Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Madeline Bowman, statewide organizer at the ACLU of Florida, and I'll be your moderator tonight. We're here to reflect on one of the most aggressive and consequential legislative sessions in recent memory. What was at stake this session? What did we learn from the fights we faced? And where do we go from here? Over the past several months, Florida's legislative supermajority launched a coordinated assault on our rights. From criminalizing immigrants in the citizen-led amendment process to censoring what we're allowed to learn, say, and teach. But they didn't count on us. Organizers, legal experts, and advocates across the state stood strong. And tonight, you'll hear from leaders who fought on the front lines. You'll learn what passed, what we stopped, and what's next in the battle to protect dignity, freedom, and justice for every Floridian. To kick us off, we'll do a round of brief introductions from our panel, Bacardi Jackson, Pamela Birch-Fort, and Kara Gross. Please note that we will be saving some time at the end for your questions, so feel free to drop them in anytime during this conversation. So I'll now turn it over to the woman who leads the ACLU of Florida with courage and conviction every day, our Executive Director, Bacardi Jackson.
Thank you so much, Madeline, and thank you to everyone who is joining us tonight. It is an honor to be here. I am Bacardi Jackson. My pronouns are she, her, and I have been the Executive Director now for a full 1 year, and it is so delightful to have such amazing colleagues in the trenches as we have gotten through a pretty interesting session, which I think you'll hear a lot about tonight, and I will pass it on to Pamela.
Thank you, Bacardi, and thank you, Madeline. Hello, everyone. I am Pamela Birch-Fort. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am based here in the capital city of Tallahassee. And whereas I have seen many legislative sessions, it has been my great honor to work as a strategic consultant with ACLU of Florida for the last 15 plus years. It has been exciting to be on the ground with my colleagues and with my partners, helping to free Florida. And I'll pass it on to Kara.
Thank you all. I'm Kara Gross, the Legislative Director and Senior Policy Counsel of the ACLU of Florida. I am based here in Tallahassee, which is the capital, so I get to go to the legislature all the time with Pamela and with so many of you here. I want to thank you for being here with us tonight, and I will pass it over to Madeline.
Thank you so much. So we'll kick it off with our first question. Bacardi, what did this session signal about the state of our democracy? Why is Florida's fight everyone's fight? And what's at stake moving forward?
Thank you for those questions. Florida didn't just hold a legislative session this year. It really staged a stress test on our democracy. Rather than doing what we elected them to do, rather than tackling housing, healthcare, rising costs, our lawmakers decided they would use their power to push for dangerous, discriminatory policies that silence voices and restrict our freedoms. This session, we saw efforts to continue expanding state control over local communities, over our school boards, and even over people's private medical decisions. What we used to think of as fringe proposals maybe years ago have now become the blueprint for our state governance and indeed our national governance. But this session also signaled that we, the people, still have power. The ACLU of Florida, which includes not only our staff, but the tens of thousands of volunteers and supporters, all of you across our state, we fought back. We went to the courts, we showed up at the Capitol, we packed committee hearings, we launched rapid response campaigns, we activated our communities and we were able to stop many of the worst attacks from becoming law. And I am super proud of that. And that's what the fight for freedom looks like. It looks like all of us, we the people, uniting across race, ethnicity, gender, backgrounds of all sorts and geographies. And we say together, we will not be silent while you dismantle our rights. And as to why Florida's fight is everyone's fight, as I started my tenure here at ACLU of Florida, my mantra has been free Florida, free the nation, because what happens in this state doesn't stay in this state. Florida is the testing ground for the authoritarian playbook that is in play nationwide. And it will take all of us to create and maintain the firewall that will protect what is at stake. And that is the rights and the freedoms guaranteed by our Constitution for ourselves, for our families, and indeed for the entire nation. Just today, we saw some of the horrific vestiges of this legislative session in real time as the Florida Highway Patrol was diverted to a construction site in Tallahassee to act as ICE agents and to detain and arrest hardworking Floridians. Law enforcement resources should be used to protect public safety, not to harass people who are simply working to support their families and contribute to their communities. These are the individuals filling critical jobs in a time of labor shortages. They are helping to build our economy, our infrastructure, and yet they are being targeted, not because they committed some crime. They are being targeted likely because of their race, the color of their skin, or the language they speak. This is not public safety. It is discrimination masquerading as law enforcement. So we have a lot of work ahead of us as we continue to beat back these horrible ideas that come out of our legislature. And we have a lot to be thankful for and to celebrate in terms of what we were able to hold the line on. And to walk us through what the session looked like in the trenches, I'm honored to turn it back over so you can bring in our brilliant legislative strategist, Pamela Birchford.
Thank you so much, Bacardi, for that. Pamela, what kind of legislation did we see this year? How did power show up in the process? How did we push back? And what harmful bills ultimately passed?
Thank you for that question, Madeline. Let's be clear. This wasn't just a legislative session. It was a power grab in broad daylight. With another year of unchecked control, Florida's legislative supermajority attempted to advance a dangerous agenda that undermines constitutional rights and strips Floridians of autonomy. And they did so while failing their only constitutional obligation to pass a state budget on time. Here's what we saw this year: sweeping attacks on democracy with bills designed to gut citizen-led amendments, suppress the vote, and embolden election police. A coordinated assault on immigrant families, as Bacardi has mentioned, including legislation criminalizing undocumented presence and diverting hundreds of millions of public dollars and critical safety resources to support mass deportation infrastructure. Deepening censorship and ideological control through bills targeting DEI, LGBTQ+ students, book bans, and new attacks on classroom speech. The erosion of law enforcement accountability with bills that shield officers from misconduct claims and silence those who try to document abuse. And yet, through relentless advocacy and organizing, we stopped many of these threats cold. But we must stay vigilant, watching the development of the state budget and knowing this legislature has already signaled its intent to double down next session. While we were successful at pushing back against many of the extreme harmful bills this session, Shamefully, the governor and the supermajority rammed through two of their priorities, despite widespread public outrage and opposition. As you may recall, before session even started, the governor put forth two of his signature priorities. One, attacking the citizen-led amendment process, and two, doubling down on the Trump administration's cruel and inhumane attacks on Florida's immigrant community. That first priority, which focused on gutting citizen-led amendment process, House Bill 1205. This legislation creates major legal and financial hurdles for Floridians to pass citizen-led amendments and have a say in the policies that shape our lives. Article 11, Section 3 of the Florida Constitution states, the power to propose the revision or amendment of any portion or portions of this Constitution by initiative is reserved to the people. Because of this constitutionally protected right, the people of Florida have been able to pass significant reforms that improve the lives of all Floridians, including becoming one of the first states in the country to offer free, voluntary pre-kindergarten education to Florida families, raising the minimum wage, which we did twice through the initiative process, protecting our environmental resources, and restoring voting rights to returning citizens. Each time one of these amendments that expand and protect our rights has passed, the legislature has sought ways to limit this right, and we've seen increasingly difficult barriers pushed through the legislature year after year, including an increase in how many petitions must be gathered and the very high 60% threshold to actually pass an amendment. In this session, House Bill 1205 goes even farther in its attempt to effectively shut down this right by severely limiting the number of petitions that volunteers can collect and criminalizing volunteers for collecting more than 25 petitions, dramatically increasing fines so that only the wealthiest entities are able to afford to sponsor citizen-led amendments, threatening criminal penalties for honest mistakes, and ultimately preventing everyday Floridians from having a say in their government. This bill takes the power away from the people and solidifies it in the hands of politicians. As my colleagues on the ground often hear me say, and I'll have to repeat it tonight, we do not elect lawmakers to rule us. We do not elect lawmakers to lead us. We elect lawmakers to represent us, to serve us. And when they don't, our Constitution gives the right to us, the people, to bring change through a citizen-led initiative process. That is our right. This legislation went too far to prevent us from engaging in our right to change our Constitution. And we really must understand when the legislature doesn't act, we do have that right. And we have all, ACLU and our partners have really come together, and we've already been in the court system to challenge the passage of House Bill 1205. Last week, we were there requesting a preliminary injunction based on First Amendment claims to halt the enactment of many of these provisions. Many of them are already effective, and many of them take effect July 1. So we are waiting now for Judge Walker in federal court to decide whether he will issue that preliminary injunction. The governor's second priority bill, designed to inflict the maximum harm on immigrants in Florida, was also shamefully passed this session. It was actually done in a special session in February. These bills, Senate Bill 2C and 4C, were among the cruelest bills we've seen, criminalizing undocumented immigrants and mandating the death penalty for some offenses. Florida ended in-state tuition for undocumented youth and redirected $300 million to fuel anti-immigrant policies, and created a state crime to enter Florida without legal status. These laws don't protect Florida. They punish people for seeking opportunity and safety. The good news is that we swiftly also challenged the constitutionality of Senate Bill 4C's provision that criminalized individuals who are their legal status by entering the state. The court agreed that the state overstepped its authority by signing into law this unconstitutional provision, and we have been able to enjoin its enforcement while the case proceeds in the courts. So thank you, Madeline. I'll pass it back to you now.
Thank you so much, Pamela. Just a reminder to folks, if you do have any questions, please drop them in the chat and we'll definitely get to those later. Kara, I'm hoping you can walk us through what harmful bills were blocked this session and what battles are coming next.
Yeah, thank you, Madeline. And this might take a bit because thankfully we were able to block a lot of bad bills this session. But unfortunately, we know that the legislature will likely bring these back again next session, and we have our work cut out for us. This session was full of contradictions. On the one hand, it fast-tracked priority legislation mentioned above that does real harm to real people. But unlike prior sessions, the supermajority and the governor failed to enact so much of its extreme legislative agenda that focused on government censorship and control, voting rights attacks, and attacking reproductive freedom and the LGBTQ community. One thing is loud and clear, though. This legislature has zero interest in passing bills that would have delivered meaningful solutions for hardworking Floridians. At every opportunity, they sought to take away power from the people and enrich themselves and their donor base at the expense of the health and safety of Floridians. Thankfully, working with partner organizations and legislative champions and all of your help, we, the people, were able to stop much of their extreme agenda. We were able to block attacks on voting rights and democracy. We were able to block a sweeping voter suppression bill that would have required first-time voters or anyone updating their voter registration to jump through overly burdensome and unnecessary hoops. This bill would have required individuals to show a passport or a birth certificate just to register to vote. This would have disenfranchised hundreds of thousands of Floridians who don't have easy access to their birth certificate or passport. In Florida alone, approximately 40% of the voting population, around 8.1 million citizens, lacks a passport. Additionally, it would have placed enormous obstacles on married women whose married names don't match the name on their birth certificate. These laws don't protect democracy, they undermine voters. We also blocked attacks on reproductive freedom and bodily autonomy. As you all know, in Florida, we currently have a dangerous and extreme abortion ban in place that is literally forcing women to remain pregnant against their will and to carry pregnancies to term, knowing that the fetus has no chance of surviving outside the womb. Under current law, by the time you miss your period, you are already considered 4 weeks pregnant, and you have at most 2 weeks to access an abortion under current law. Despite the fact that this is often called a 6-week ban, it's really just 2 weeks after you miss your period. The vast majority of Floridians support reproductive freedom, and the vast majority of Floridians oppose the 6-week abortion ban. But the Republican supermajority sought to further restrict access to abortion by opening the door for civil lawsuits for damages against doctors who provide abortions and against the support systems, the family members and the loved ones and the friends of those who access abortion. A similar bill like this, a wrongful death bill, was passed in Texas a few years ago. And under it, an abuser brought a lawsuit for $1 million against his ex-wife's two best friends who helped her access abortion medication. And that is what they were trying to pass in Florida, a similar bill to that. We spent significant time and effort and resources this session fighting back against these bills. And thankfully, we were able to stop them from passing this session. Additionally, we fought back and prevailed against bills that would have made it harder for minors to access birth control and that would have forced doctors to turn away and deny treatment for minors with STIs. This session showed us that the Republican supermajority is not stopping at a 6-week ban. They are coming after our birth control, and they want to exert greater control over our bodies. Fortunately, these bills did not pass this session, but they will be back. We were able to block attacks on free speech. The supermajority pushed several government censorship bills this session, and thankfully, we were able to prevent many of them from crossing the finish line. We were able to defeat a bill that would have censored media outlets and undermined the First Amendment rights of the press and of reporters. This bill would have made it easier to sue media outlets for defamation. We were able to prevent this bill from passing the finish line. Additionally, working with our partners and all of you, we were able to block bills that would have expanded book bans in Florida, that would have censored diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, bills that would have banned pride flags and Black Lives Matter flags, bills that would have banned K-12 students from engaging in social and political activism at school, and bills that would have protected Confederate monuments and that would have abolished workplace protections for LGBTQ employees. These government censorship attacks aren't just legislative, they're ideological. They are trying to control what we read, what we learn, and our freedom to be who we are. I want to also highlight two other extreme bills pushed by the supermajority this session that came incredibly close to passing that would have been devastating to Floridians. One of the most egregious was the attempt to pass a law abolishing child labor protections and safeguards that have been in place for decades and enabling employers to exploit children. This bill would have allowed employers to exploit children as young as 14 years old, forcing them to work overnight shifts for unlimited days on school nights. Current anti-immigrant laws have led to less cheap labor in Florida, particularly in construction and agriculture and hospitality. And this is impacting businesses' bottom lines. And so in order to fill that gap, this legislature sought to allow employers to exploit child labor. And I just want to, take a minute to think about that. This legislature that pretends to care about children was going to allow employers to exploit children as young as 14 years old, forcing them to work overnight shifts, and 15-year-olds and 16-year-olds. This bill shows just how little regard the administration has for the health and the safety of Florida's youth. Another bill that ultimately did not pass, but would have undermined Florida's minimum wage protections and would have allowed employers to exploit workers and pay them less than the constitutionally required minimum wage. As many of you know, in 2020, Floridians overwhelmingly voted in favor of a constitutional amendment requiring explicit minimum wage amounts And this legislature once again sought to ignore the will of the people and sidestep our Constitution. Fortunately, we, all of us standing together, were able to push back on so many of these bad bills. But make no mistake, what we're seeing is not normal. And it's not just bad policy. It's the government's attempt to control the narrative, the ballot, and our bodies. And we won't let them.
Thank you so much, Bacardi, Pamela, and Kara. Your leadership and clarity are exactly what we need in this moment. We'll now open the floor for questions. So if you haven't already, please use our Q&A box. And so we'll take a few of your questions now. So to start off, what exactly makes a legislator do what you want them to do? In other words, how can we effectively engage with our legislators?
I'm going to take that one, Madeline. There are many ways to get your legislator to do what you want them to do. First of all, we have an election that comes up, and elections have consequences. So I always encourage people to really educate yourself. Educate yourself as to who the candidates are. Know who your elected representatives are. They have 2 offices, generally. They have offices within their districts, so it would be near where you live. And they have offices in Tallahassee. They are generally only in Tallahassee during the legislative sessions and occasionally during those weeks that we call interim committee weeks, just prior to the session beginning. You should be able to find your elected representative online. You can contact them via email. You can contact them via phone. You can send letters. You can send petitions. You can show up in their offices with an appointment or without an appointment in your district or in Tallahassee. But educating yourself is extremely important. You also have to share what you learn with others. It's very important that once you know who your district representative happens to be, share it with your family, share it with your organizations, your clubs, your church members, so that people will have a sense of whether these individuals share the same values that you do. Learning about legislators. You can also join a campaign. There are many activities that are going on. ACLU offers through its field a capacity, the opportunity to participate in roundtables. We have webinars and seminars. That is one good way for you to engage, learn about your elected officials, know how you can reach them, and know what the issue of the day happens to be. You can also join a pro-democracy organization like the ACLU of Florida. That is one excellent way of learning not only about who the elected officials are, but what they should be doing, to learn about the legislation that's being enacted at any given time. And of course, you have to vote in every election, national elections, state elections, local elections. And that is one way, again, of engaging and understanding the role of the people in government and remembering that government is for the people. It's of the people. It's by the people. And we have to stay engaged. So we welcome your interest in participating with ACLU of Florida. I'm sure if you send us an email because you don't know who your elected representative is, if you give us your zip code, we can tell you who that person is. But it is very important to engage and actively participate in an effort to ensure that our communities are well served and we are all well served.
I'll also add to that. Thank you, Pamela. another really good thing is that, a lot of people try and get involved when the legislative session is already underway and legislators are already here in Tallahassee. And what's really interesting is that the best time to get involved is actually when it's not legislative session. It's actually this in-between period right now, because now legislators are home in your district, right? So you can contact them. They have more availability. They have more time. And being able to connect with the legislature in their home district is so powerful. For one, it's easier because you don't have to travel all the way to Tallahassee. But for two, it lets them know that you are their constituent. Like when they go to the supermarket, they could see you. When they go to their kid's soccer game, you might be there. So being able to reach out to them during this interim time when it's not legislative session is really the most important thing that can happen right now.
Awesome. Thank you so much, both of you, for those responses. For other questions we've received, what can we do to support people blocked from abortion access here in Florida?
I can start with that. So the thing that everybody can do, and the most important thing to do is what Pamela said. Our elected officials are not representing the voices of Floridians. So the majority of Floridians, the vast majority, do not want these extreme abortion bans. And so holding our elected officials accountable, making sure that every person, that even if you're going to vote a certain way, making sure every person that you interact with, that is your friends, your family, your community, that they also are going to vote aligned with these issues. Because that's how we make change, is by having people in office that agree with us on these issues. While we're here, when it's not an election time, although as Pamela said, there are always different local elections, school board elections that are happening all the time. So don't just wait for the sort of big elections, but any local election that is happening, make sure that, if that's an important issue to you, which it is to all of us, make sure that you make that your vote matches that issue, and you make sure that you hold whoever is accountable to voting for that issue. Right now, there are, abortion access is still available in Florida. And I think that is important to know. It is very, very, very difficult because of the restrictions that our elected officials have put in place and have intentionally put in place. But so making sure that you and everybody understands what the law is right now. Because what happens constantly is that people show up for their abortion appointment and they don't realize that it's too late, that they have passed the 6-week point. They don't realize that it's really just 2 weeks after you miss a period. So making sure that everybody in your networks understands what the law is so that they can protect themselves best against it, making sure that people always have access to pregnancy tests. You don't want to have to go to the store to have to get it when you need it. You want to make sure you have those on hand. You want to make sure you know where your local clinics are, so that if you do find yourself or someone else finds themselves in this situation, you're able to get them an appointment right away. You don't have to research that at the moment. So just doing those things to try and make it so that you can get the access that you need is super important. Also, there are plenty of abortion funds, and supporting abortion funds would be very important as well. And making sure that the information in terms of where you might need to travel to if you happen to find yourself after the 6 weeks already. And Bacardi, I think I saw you come off mute.
Yeah, I was going to mention that too, about the supporting the organizations that are providing funds. So when people have to travel out of state so they can access abortion care, they can do that. In addition, it's important for people to be educated about what is and is not actual abortion care. In Florida, we have these things called crisis pregnancy centers that are masquerading as abortion care, and they tell people they can come in for an ultrasound. And many of them will lie to people and tell them that they're past the date, even if they're not, or will mislead people and then try to talk them out of abortion care that they may want to seek, or make them somehow shamed and humiliated. So I think it is important to educate your communities about what care actually is. And it's also important for us to lift up stories, telling the stories of how all of this legislation impacts our lives on each of these issues, not just abortion care, but especially on that right now. We know that as these laws go into effect, they have really horrific consequences, and we need to tell those stories. People need to understand what's happening, and stories are powerful tools in moving legislators and moving the public to put pressure on legislators. So we invite you to join us. You can always step up to aclufl.org /volunteers to sign up to get engaged in these campaigns, and we hope you will.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Another question. As a teacher, I am worried about the future of schools and students' rights. What can I do to help? So I can start off with that one. I think, as teachers, educators, students who are, impacted by what we're seeing right now in our school system, there's so much power in your voice and what you can do in your own community. I would definitely encourage you to get involved with, if you have a local group in town, or if you want to get involved, with the ACLU right now, we have a statewide free speech meeting that meets every single month. We'd love to hear from you. We love to connect, educators across the state, students, parents, teachers, anyone who, cares about what they're seeing. There's a lot of power, as Bacardi was saying, in telling your story. So finding a way to amplify that, whether that's on social media, writing letters to school board, showing up to school board meetings. We need you in those spaces. And we'd also love to work with you, if you haven't spoken in front of, a school board meeting before, or a city commission, county commission, just finding the ways that you can make an impact in those spaces and tell your story can really motivate people to, want to get involved. So I think that's one way you can definitely get involved if you are a teacher. And of course, I think doing things in your own community, if you want to host a forum, and know your rights training, those are all things, within your power to make an impact in your community.
And Madeline, I just want to take a moment to thank this individual for being a teacher, for staying in the system and not, succumbing to all of the fear and discontent that is happening in our public school education system. So thank you for your service.
Yeah, and I want to just also remind us how powerful the voices of children and students are. We often will tell children they're our future, but they are our present. And every major movement that has succeeded and happened in this country has been led by young people. And I think we need to make sure our young people know their own power and their own voices. So when you go to these meetings and show up to talk to local policymakers or statewide policymakers, take students with you. Let them understand that they also are to be represented and served by the people who we have elected. So I always like to remind young people that they are our present. And then in addition, I think it is important for us to think about how do we supplement what our children are losing. Even if the state interferes with our rights and the constitutional rights of our children to learn, to read, educators to educate, we can always do things in our own communities. And I think in this moment, we have to be creative. There are many of us who come from communities where education has been stopped for us in the past. We have ancestors who had to live under the threat of death to not be able to read. And we found ways around that. So we must remind ourselves of the strength of our history and know we've been here before. We can conquer this again.
Thank you so much, Bacardi. Another question, how can I protect my immigrant family from racial profiling?
I could start with that. Yeah, so on our website, and Madeline can forward these after as well, but we have a lot of resources for sort of, family preparation and preparedness plans. So really just knowing the law, educating yourself, attending one of our Know Your Rights trainings, just sort of plugging in and getting involved with our work. You'll find that you have resources, not just resources in terms of know your rights materials, but also just resources in terms of other people that you can talk with that are also going through this, so that you can share information and also support one another.
Yeah, and sadly, unfortunately, none of us can protect people from racial profiling in this environment. And it's not even just our immigrant neighbors and friends, it's all of us, because the standard that's out on the street with our police officers and folks who are stepping in, acting as ICE agents, is basically anyone who looks like an immigrant, anyone who sounds like an immigrant. We are seeing racial profiling happening daily across the whole nation, not just our state. It's important to go to these trainings to understand what the latest trends are. Take down air fresheners from your mirrors. Take off things that will get you pulled over. Make sure your tail lights are working. We are seeing so many violations of people's rights that it is hard to protect. But the best way to at least try to minimize and mitigate some of the harm we are seeing is to be well informed and to make sure the people in your lives do know their rights and know what they can say no to.
Yeah, and I also just want to add to that, we work in a coalition with groups as well. If you are witnessing anything, having to do with interacting with ICE, if you are witnessing something or you yourself, please report it to our RAISE hotline. We need to keep, our community abreast of what's happening in our coalition. So we will also send out more information about that, but that's also an excellent resource to use in the moment as well. And then I see we have another question. Please explain in more detail about collecting petitions as individuals and as a hub for Florida Decides Healthcare.
I'll take that one. There are actually two sets of rules under House Bill 1205. There's one set of rules that apply to registered petition circulators. You have to register under the state of Florida if you want to collect more than 25 petitions. The 25 is applied for volunteers. And that is, interestingly enough, a very big win for us. When the bills were filed and through most of the legislative session, you could only collect 2. And that was outrageous. So as outrageous as 25 may be, 2 was just astounding. So you can collect more than 25 if you register with the state. The hubs, which are distributed around the state for the purpose of collecting what other individuals get assigned and signatures for, they have a separate process for turning those petitions over to the state. They have 10 days to get that done. But we are working on guidelines to help our everyday citizens to feel comfortable and to have some sense of protection for collecting these petitions. You are allowed to not be registered and hand someone a blank petition form. That individual can complete the petition and mail the petition in at their convenience. So we work very hard to ensure that everyday citizens and Floridians can continue to participate in what their own constitution allows them to do. So despite these restrictions, these heinous attacks on our own democracy, there are ways for all of us to participate in these efforts to bring change that we need in Florida.
And Pamela, thank you so much for reminding people that there are these incredible, the work of so many to make sure that there are spaces for us to continue doing this work. It is so important for people to be aware of the new law, because we also don't want to see people having the really dire consequences that are in the law. if you are caught with more than 25 petitions and you are not registered, you could be subject to, I believe, a third-degree felony that's punishable up to 5 years in prison. So we don't want to see these kinds of laws take effect and harm people, because that will also harm our democracy as a whole when people are seeing folks getting arrested or something like that. So please educate others about what these laws say and make sure people are operating within the four corners of the law as they engage in this work.
Thank you both for those responses. And one other question that just came in. Is there anything in progress or planned to restore transgender people's ability to change the gender marker on state IDs and birth certificates?
I can take that. I mean, as I'm sure everybody here knows, there's an all-out attack from the supermajority on transgender individuals, on the LGBTQ community as a whole. And the elected officials, as Pamela said, are supposed to represent us. And instead, they are choosing to use their power in office to harm individuals and to threaten the livelihood and the rights of Floridians to just exist. Right now, they are doing that in full force. We are seeing that in the legislation that they are passing. And it is a really difficult time to be able to move the needle on some of these things in ways that we would be able to if we had different elected officials in place.
Thank you, Kara. We are also getting questions about how to get involved in the ACLU of Florida's work. So if you are interested in helping, volunteer, advocate with us, you can sign up through our volunteer form, which is on our website. We have lots of opportunities for folks to get involved, whatever background you have, whatever skill sets you also have, we want to work with you. So you can sign up via our volunteer form. You can also visit our Mobilize, which has all of our team meetings, our trainings, webinars that we host every single week. So if there's anything that interests you, whether it's free speech related or immigrant rights or reproductive justice, we have a lot going on. And if you, just want to learn more about where you fit in, or you just have questions about the work that we're doing, the organizers on our team will meet with you one-on-one, virtually, or a phone call, if you prefer, and we'll talk with you, about your interests, what we can do together to, make change here in Florida. For those of you who are joining us, we have organizers on the ground in Leon County, Orange County, Broward, and Miami-Dade. And we also have lots of virtual opportunities for folks in other areas. So we would love to work with you, and please reach out if you do want to get involved. All right, I don't see any other questions. So I want to thank everyone for all of those great questions and for joining us tonight. Tonight's briefing is about more than bills. It's about people. And people in Florida are tired of being ignored, silenced, or sacrificed for political gain. This session proved one thing: when we fight together, we win together. We showed up in the streets, the chambers, the press, and the courts, and will continue showing up. The ACLU of Florida remains unwavering in our mission to defend civil liberties and to protect the promise of freedom for every Floridian, regardless of race, gender, immigration status, or zip code. Thank you so much for standing with us. In the words of those who've come before us, forward, not backward, justice, not hate, freedom, not fear. Thank you so much, Bacardi, Pamela, and Kara for being on this event tonight. And thank you all for showing up and asking such great questions. We'll see you soon.